Welcome back. Elon Musk's rocket company SpaceX reportedly made a slim profit in the first 3 months of the year after 2 years of losses. The Wall Street Journal viewed financial documents from the privately held company showing it made a $55 million profit on revenue of $1.5 billion in the first quarter. SpaceX currently launches rockets for, amongst others, NASA and for its own satellite internet business, Starlink. And speaking of NASA, it is getting ready to go back to the moon with its first crewed moon landing mission since 1972. Artemis 3 is expected to set off in 2025 with preparations well underway, and private companies are getting a slice of the lunar pie, estimated to be worth $100 billion. SpaceX and rival Blue Origin, for example, are already invested with their rocket systems. Lockheed Martin is building a new satellite network around the moon, and Nokia is planning to launch 4G internet on the moon later this year. And there could be more opportunities as space agencies from China, Russia, and Japan are also bringing on board private firms. For more on this topic, I'm joined by Ben Bergman. He's a senior correspondent at Business Insider. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. I have to say, when it comes to space innovation, I'm a dummy, but a lot of people on our staff were very excited about this segment, so we're really happy to have you on. Hopefully, I'm going to learn something, and so will our viewers. So space is really gearing up to be this multi-billion-dollar industry, and many companies and startups are wrangling to get ahead of the curve, get a piece of the pie, perhaps none more than the US. NASA has really spearheaded an effort to get back to the moon, opening the door to a lot of private investment and effort. Are other countries doing the same, and what are the pros and cons of all of this private investment?
Well, it's striking that you have the richest people in the world, and what are they doing with all their fortune? They're not giving it away like Bill Gates did and trying to solve world hunger or humiliate other issues in the world. They want to go to space, just as the explorers centuries ago wanted to explore the oceans. People like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos want to go to space. And you know, it's not just their goals or their ego. SpaceX, less so than Jeff Bezos' company Blue Origin, is proving to be enormously popular. SpaceX is now the most valuable private startup in the world. Even as other startups have seen their valuations plummet, SpaceX is now valued at $150 billion.
So with all of this growing interest and private funding that's being poured into sort of innovation, it spurs competition. What we're seeing is gigantic increases in things like landers and rovers on the moon. The numbers are supposed to exponentially grow over the next few years. So how important will technological the edge there be tied to things like communication services, GPS, and we talked about it in the intro, Wi-Fi from Nokia coming in the next 12 months. That seems incredible to me. What is it going to take to build out that sort of infrastructure?
Well, it's very capital intensive. It takes a lot, but SpaceX has Starlink, which is thought to be going public before SpaceX itself, and that's tremendously valuable company. And this is low Earth orbit satellites, which can provide internet anywhere in the world. And Elon Musk has been launching them. Jeff Bezos has not been able to do it yet, but Elon Musk has a huge start. And this has huge implications. We've already seen it in the war in Ukraine, because it's also a huge national security issue.
I've got to just point out that there are some areas in the world where we don't have enough internet access, in suburbs and small areas, and you're talking about internet on the moon. It seems incredible to me. But Russia and India also getting in on the action. They're currently racing to land on the moon's south pole. Why the interest in that part of the region, and what are the opportunities that area might present?
It does seem surprising because I can't even get internet in my apartment sometimes. So why would you have internet on the moon? But I think it's just the same issues we've seen for decades of wanting to lay a claim to space, and also it helps you launch to other places as well, because space is getting more crowded with all these low Earth satellites. There's hundreds of them, and they require much more than the satellites that are higher in altitude. So it's getting crowded up there.
It definitely is. And I remember, a couple of years ago, you may remember as well, where Elon Musk got in trouble because one of his, all of the junk satellites up in space, one of them was about to collide with a Chinese satellite. So there definitely needs to be a bit more navigation up there as well that's going on. So far, there are only 3 governments that have managed to successfully land on the moon: the Soviet Union, the United States, China. Does Russia and India's foray now pave the way for more human crewed missions to the moon? How far away are we from a commercial sort of, moon landing and possible colonization?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about that. We're probably quite a ways from that. NASA does want to return to the moon with the help of SpaceX in 2024, which is really interesting to see because it's the moon we just don't hear about anymore. It was a thing in the 60s and the 70s, and then it seems like it was all about Mars and deep space. So it's very interesting that now the moon is suddenly a focal point again, back to the future.
It seems to be that, space is really the next frontier, and whichever sort of area of the world, whichever country dominates, has a real advantage. I'm kind of wondering what sort of technological breakthroughs geared towards that sort of innovation and leading the way do you see coming down the pipeline? And what sort of opportunities does it then present as far as being a leader, sort of dominating in innovation and in space for countries? I'm talking about countries like US vis-a-vis China, for example.
Well, I think the key for getting into space has been doing it reliably and doing it cheaply. And no one has been able to do that better than SpaceX because Elon Musk has been able to come in and beat these huge incumbents like Lockheed Martin and NASA itself and be very successful and been able to launch a ton of rockets very cheaply and safely, which is why he's able to get all these satellites into space. So it all works together because space is still incredibly dangerous and incredibly tricky. And when you start talking about colonization or space tourism, this is something that people want to do. They've been signing up for it. But we're a long ways away from making it reliable so that passengers can go.
You touched on exactly what I wanted to ask you, which is, there are these sort of people, very rich people, who are signing up because it costs a fortune, right, to be able to make these sort of trips. Is it something that you would ever see yourself doing?
I don't think so. Luckily, I don't have that problem because I'm a poor journalist. But just of all the things to do, it seems enormously risky. But I'll tell you what, it seems better than going to the bottom of the ocean, as we saw with what happened with the Titanic.
That is true. It is definitely the next frontier, and there is a lot of innovation happening. All right, thank you so much for your time, Ben Bergman.
Thanks so much.